When we talk about America, there's always the phrase that comes up, almost religiously, the American dream. And it's not just a phrase, it's more like an idea woven deeply into our cultural fabric. It's a story we were all told growing up, right? Like if you work hard enough, you can become anything, achieve anything, have anything. Like a nice house, a stable job, a secure retirement, maybe send your kids off to a good school. And that's the promise. At least that's how it was always sold. But what if I told you that that dream, this idea we built our lives around, might just be the greatest myth we ever been told? And if we go any further, I need to make one thing very clear to everybody. This isn't a message of hate or resentment. It's not cynicism or bitterness. It's a conversation, a necessary conversation about honesty, about taking a real look at the promise and seeing what's left of it. It's about asking the questions. Can we still call it a dream if millions of people are waking up every day feeling trapped in a nightmare? To start, let's define clearly what we're talking about. The American dream. A phrase that was popularized by historian James Truslow Adams back in 1931. In his book, The Epic of America, Adams described it as a vision of a society where life could be better, richer, and fuller for everyone, regardless of social class or circumstances of birth. Like, notice the last part, regardless of circumstances of birth. It's powerful, revolutionary. Even it was a radical idea at the time when the Great Depression had ripped through the country, like tearing apart families, leaving millions unemployed. It's like desperate, searching for a silver of hope. Then in post World War II, America ran with this idea and turned it into something grander, something marketable. Suddenly, the American dream wasn't just about stability. It became about prosperity, about wealth, about upward mobility. It's like buy a house, buy a car, fill the home with appliances. It was consumerist paradise painted in vibrant shades of aspiration. The dream became synonymous with ownership, consumption, material success. It became the cultural narrative that kept society moving, spending, and believing. But let's fast forward to today. How does that dream hold up under scrutiny? How real is it for us, for you, for me in 2025? Now let's consider this. Today, wages for the American worker have barely budged in the last 5 decades. In fact, once you adjust for inflation, the hourly wage for a typical worker hasn't really moved since the 1970s. At the same time, prices for homes, healthcare, education, and basic necessities have skyrocketed. How exactly do you achieve this dream if you can barely afford rent, let alone buy a house? According to a Pew Research from 1964 to 2024, median wages increased just 17%. Housing prices, though, they shot up nearly 120%. College tuition, it ballooned more than 2,800%. Think about that, 2,800%. And healthcare is risen almost 10 times faster than wages. That ladder, the one we're supposed to climb to prosperity, hasn't just gotten steeper. It feels like someone stole half the rungs overnight and left millions hanging and reaching but unable to grasp the next step. Now let's talk about debt, especially student debt. The cost of that good education we've been told is essential to success has created an economic catastrophe for an entire generation or generations. Young people today carry 1.8 trillion in student loans, far surpassing credit card or even auto loan debt. We've told an entire generation, just go to college, the rest will take care of itself. But did it? No. The reality is millions have graduated straight into debt, into jobs that barely pay enough to make minimum payments. Forget home ownership. Many are barely surviving month to month. And here's the hardest part of the story. Upward economic mobility. The core promise of the American dream is a historic lows. In 1940, 90% of children grew up to earn more than their parents. Today, less than half can expect the same. For the first time in generations, the vast majority feel like they might be worse off than those who came before. Imagine telling your kids, honestly, you might not do better than we did. That is not a dream. That's a harsh wake-up call to reality. Again, I want to emphasize this isn't about resentment. It's about truth and recognizing that we've been sold and what we are living no longer match. This gap between promise and reality breeds a lot of frustration, disappointment, and yes, anger. But it also offers an opportunity to ask ourselves honestly, what happened to the dream? Was it always flawed, or did we simply lose our way? Who benefits from us believing the dream is still within easy reach? And who suffers? Again, this podcast isn't about pointing out the flaws. It's about figuring out what comes next. How do we redefine success? How do we reshape society so the ladder has its old rungs again, so everyone can climb, not just the privileged few? How do we transform the American dream from a myth into a genuine opportunity for every single person who calls this place home? Because if we're honest, the dream wasn't supposed to be a competition or a race. It was supposed to be a collective promise, a societal vision. If we sold the nightmare as a dream, it's not too late to wake up and reshape that vision. But first, we have to confront it head on. We have to be honest about what happened, how it happened, and most importantly, how we fix it together. Because in today's episode, that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll look at how the dream became distorted, how it was sold to us, and why it's crucial to understand this myth if we're going to build something better. Because whether or not we realize it, every single one of us is living in the shadow of this idea. And it's long past time we shine a little light on it. Let's dive deeper into this American dream. Or perhaps more accurately, the myth that keeps many of us running in circles. If you step back and really look at it, the most critical question is, who actually benefits from maintaining the belief in this dream? Who profits from keeping this illusion alive? To understand who benefits, let's first rewind the tape a bit. The concept of the American dream gained widespread popularity in the early 20th century, as mentioned earlier, particularly during the Great Depression. Again, historian James Truslow Adams first coined the term in 1931, painted as the hopeful idea amidst economic despair. It promised a better life, regardless of one's origin or social class. And in the post-war boom of the 1950s, it formed into an ideal of suburban prosperity, owning a house, car, and providing a comfortable life for one's family. But even then, this promise wasn't equally accessible. Redlining practices systematically excluded black families and other minorities from this prosperity, or laying a foundation of racial economic inequality that still persists to this day. Now let's start with politicians. Think about how many campaigns you've watched, how many political speeches you've heard, all wrapped neatly around this promise. Vote for me and I'll restore the American dream. Politicians across the spectrum leverage this idea because it works, it resonates, it gives hope. But increasingly, it's also used to justify the status quo, especially growing inequality. When politicians say the American dream is within your reach, they're subtly implying that if you haven't achieved it yet, that's your fault, not theirs. They're off the hook. They don't have to address systemic problems. Instead, they feed the narrative that you just need to try harder, work longer hours, sacrifice more, hustle a little harder. But here's the harsh truth. Hustle culture has become one of the most profitable tools to those at the top. Think about corporations promoting messages like rise and grind, hustle harder, work smarter, not just harder. Like, it sounds motivational, sure, but underneath, it's a dangerous message that says if you're not succeeding, you're just not working hard enough. It never acknowledges the reality of stagnant wages, unaffordable housing, or overwhelming debt. Historically, the shift toward hustle culture and individualism began with the neoliberal policies of the 1980s, championed by leaders like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Their ideologies emphasize personal responsibility, deregulation, and tax cuts for the wealthy. And this set the stage for a massive wealth concentration. These policies dismantle social safety nets and empower corporations to prioritize profits over people, dramatically widening income inequality. Corporations directly benefit from this bootstrap mentality. Because as long as workers believe the system is fair, they'll accept low wages, poor conditions, minimal benefits, and endless overtime as just the price they have to pay to someday achieve that dream. Meanwhile, productivity in America has soared by over 60% since the 1970s, but the wages barely budge. Where's the profit from all this extra work going? I'll tell you where. The top 1%. According to the recent data from the Economic Policy Institute, since 1979, the top 1% of earners have seen their income skyrocket by 226%, while the bottom 90%, which is the rest of us, have only seen an increase of about 20%. So if you don't know what I mean, let's translate it. For every dollar in raises that typical Americans got, the richest got over $11. Now, let's layer race onto this because why not? When we talk about the American dream, we have to acknowledge it wasn't ever been evenly accessible. Systemic racism was deliberately restricted the opportunities of entire communities. And consider this, according to the Federal Reserve data from 2024, the median wealth of white households was about $190,000, which is crazy to say that aloud. But for black households, it was only $24,000. Hispanic households about $36,000. And that's not an accident. It's a legacy of policies like redlining, wage discrimination, mass incarceration, and barriers to ownership. Yet, despite these glaring disparities, the American dream insists just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But what if your boots have no straps? What if someone keeps stealing your boots? Millennials and Gen Zs are the most educated generations in American history. Yet they're financially worse off than their parents. In a 2023 Pew study found that fewer than half of millennials earn more than their parents did at their age. For Gen Z, the outlook is even bleaker. They're stepping into adulthood saddled with historic debt, skyrocketing house prices, stagnant wages, and jobs without security. Their dreams aren't about thriving anymore, simply about surviving. And yet, the narrative persists. This one that I hear all the time. You're just lazy, entitled, unwilling to work as hard as your parents. That's the gaslighting at the heart of hustle culture. It distracts us from the real conversations we should be having about broken systems, rigged economies, and deliberate policy choice that funnel wealth upwards. And I want to stress something important here. It's not your work ethic that's broken. You're not failing because you don't hustle hard enough. You're exhausted because you're running a race designed to keep most people behind. You're stressed because you're trying to thrive in a system designed to extract every ounce of your labor for someone else's profit. The wealthiest individuals and corporations love this narrative because it shields from the scrutiny. It shifts responsibility away from their record profits and towards your perceived perceived laziness is the best word I can say it. When Amazon CEO Andy Jassy earned over $200 million in 2022, did they hustle thousands of times harder than the average workers making $17 an hour? Or is it something fundamentally wrong with the system that rewards executive greed at the expense of worker survival? In the end, and again, if you're going to say, well, it's like, who isn't the Jeff Bezos? No, he's the founder. He's not the CEO. Andy Jassy is. In the end, the American dream isn't inherently wrong. What's wrong is the way it's been twisted to serve the interests of a powerful few at the expense of everyone else. Like, we need to reclaim the dream, not as an individual race to the top, but as a shared vision for a fairer society. A society where hard work is actually rewarded fairly, where everyone genuinely has the tools to build a better life. Because dreaming should never just be about it should never just be for the privilege. Dreaming, after all, is supposed to be universal. So when we talk about the American dream, there's a cost. One we've been conditioned to overlook. It's hidden in plain sight. Debt. It is not accidental. Debt isn't just a side effect of pursuing a dream. It's part of the design. And so to understand why debt is central in this conversation, we need some historical context. So after World War II, debt became a mainstream financial tool in America. So the GI Bill of 1944 provided returning soldiers low-cost mortgages and education loans. So fueling the rapid suburban expansion and home ownership boom of the 50s and 60s. At the time, debt was considered manageable, an investment in stability. But fast forward to today, and debt isn't empowering families to grow wealth. It's trapping them in perpetual financial insecurity. The American dream now arrives with a price tag so heavy that millions spend their entire lives trying to pay it off. So let's start with student debt. Today's student loans total over $1.7 trillion. Trillion, not billion, trillion. And so to put this in perspective, that's larger than the GDP of countries like Australia, Spain, or Mexico. So college tuition, adjusted by inflation, has increased nearly 2,800% to 300% since the 1970s. Since exactly the year 1970. And unlike previous generations, current students have no guarantee of a job that pays enough to service their loans. The crisis didn't just happen overnight. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, state and federal funding for higher education dwindled dramatically. Universities raised tuition to compensate, and student loans, both public and private, filled the gap. Colleges were marketed aggressively, not as institutions of learning, but as necessary investments to secure a prosperous future. So in 1965, when Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Higher Education Act, the government's intention was to increase access to education and upward mobility. Yet, decades later, under neoliberal policies, student loans became profit center for banks and private companies. Federal loan programs were even altered so that leaders face minimal risk, guaranteeing profit regardless of student outcomes. Think about what that means today. Young people enter adulthood already chained to debt. This delays critical milestones, buying homes, starting families, saving for retirement, and the narrative is always the same. It's your responsibilities, they said. But no one ever warned them. They spend decades servicing interest, trapped in a cycle where payments barely touch the principal. But it's not just education. The housing market is equally predatory. After the 2008 financial crisis was a perfect storm of greed and deregulation. I talked about it in my White Crime series, remember that, where banks manipulated and exploited dreams of home ownership. Mortgages was aggressively marketed, even for those who couldn't afford them. Banks deliberately obscured terms with complex language. And then at adjustable rates, balloon payments, mortgages designed to fail. Again, white collar crimes, part 3. Remember that. It's right there. Remember, homeownership was originally marketed as cornerstones of the American dream after World War II. However, discriminatory practices like redlining prevented black families from building generational wealth. Even today, communities of color suffer disproportionately more from foreclosure and eviction crisis due to the systemic inequality embedded within housing policies. Now, let's go back to during the 2008 crash. American loss was around $16 trillion in wealth. Think that, $16 trillion of wealth lost in that year, and that disproportionately affecting lower and middle class families. Banks, on the other hand, were bailout and to the tune of $700 billion. Today, homeownership rates for millennials and Gen Z trail far behind previous generations at the same age, making it clear that buying a home is no longer a ticket to prosperity. It's a pathway to decades of debt. And there's the medical debt. The uniquely American phenomenon of healthcare bankruptcy is shocking when compared globally. No other developed nation experiences mass financial ruin from getting sick. Each year, approximately 500,000 Americans declare bankruptcy due to medical bills. Let that sink in. In America, illness doesn't just threaten your health, it threatens your entire economic survival. I'll also talk about this in my Lies We Tell, why we can't have universal health care, apparently. So let's continue. In 1971, President Nixon signed legislation introducing health maintenance organization, privatizing healthcare further. As the decades progressed, healthcare evolved from a service into a profit-driven industry. Today, medical debt totals around $195 billion in America, disproportionately harming lower-income families, single parents, the elderly, and marginalized communities. Let's talk about real-life events. Let's take Sarah, a listener from Ohio. She wrote to us saying, "When I was diagnosed with cancer at 26, I wasn't scared of dying. I was scared of surviving, because surviving meant financial ruin. My American dream ended the day the hospital bills arrived." Or James from California, who told us, "My parents lost our childhood home because my mother needed emergency surgery. Insurance didn't cover it all. They sold everything, lost everything just because someone got sick." And these are not isolated stories. They reflect a pattern, a systemic crisis built in American economy, the economic model. Why does this happen? Simply put, debt is profitable for banks, loan services, and for profit colleges, healthcare operations. Your debt is their business model. Debt is the product and is sold to us as a means to achieve the American dream, even when it actively undermines that very dream. Debt isn't a personal failing. It's an economy strategy. It transfers wealth from ordinary families to corporations and executives. Your dream house has become someone else's payday loan. Your education is a lifetime annuity for banks. Your health crisis is someone's quarterly profit. But here's the crucial point. It doesn't have to be this way. Debt doesn't have to be the engine of our economy. Historically, public investment in education, healthcare, and housing were foundational in creating prosperity. Policies like the New Deal prove government can and should protect citizens from predatory capitalism. Imagine a country where education is a right, not a lifelong death sentence, where housing is affordable and secure, where healthcare doesn't bankrupt families. It is possible. Other nations do it every day. So why can't we? Because those profiting from our debt are the same entities funding political campaigns, shaping legislation, lobbying against reform. They spend billions of dollars convincing us debt is normal, inevitable, even virtuous. To change this, we must first understand it. Debt is not a necessity. It's a manufacturer choice. It doesn't reflect personal failure. It reflects a systemic design. Once we realize that, we can demand change. And now, I want to hear from you. Please comment on this. I invite listeners to share your experiences with debt, whether student loans, housing, medical bills. How has debt impacted your life? How did it shape your view of the American dream? Because your stories matter. Because debt thrives in silence. When we talk about this openly, we reclaim the power. We challenge the narrative. We push back against the predatory forces that turn dreams into liabilities. In the end, the price tag placed on the American dream isn't fixed. We have the power, together, to demand a better deal. It starts by acknowledging the truth. The dream should never be someone else's profit margin. And then, growing up as a kid in Colombia, my earliest memories of America weren't from a classroom. They came from movies, TV shows, commercials, and music. And they always told the same story. America was this magical land of endless possibilities. Even local television in Colombia will say the same thing, that if you went to America, you will have the opportunity to be richer than everybody else. And I remember watching films where the characters packed their entire lives into a single suitcase, leaving everything they knew behind. They arrive in the United States with empty pockets but a heart full of dreams. Then, through sheer determination and hard work, they achieve the unimaginable success, wealth, respect, and freedom. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a narrative carefully constructed and sold to the world. We believed it. Why wouldn't we? It was America after all. A place so powerful, so prosperous that its streets were said to be paved with gold. Like, we internalized the message. Come here, work hard, and you'll thrive. But reality has a way of shattering that illusion we hold most dear. When immigrants step onto American soil, many quickly find that dream they were sold isn't just hard to achieve. Often it feels really impossible, almost impossible. Now, here's some of the realities. America has a long marketed itself as a beacon of hope. From the late 1800s to the early 1900s, Europeans immigrants saw Ellis Island as a gateway to prosperity. And yet, upon arrival, many were greeted with crowded tenements, grueling labor conditions, and rampant discrimination. Chinese immigrants, essential in building America's railroads, were met with hostility and exclusionary laws, such as the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Also talked about this in another episode. I mean, it all comes together, guys. And today's immigrants face a similar dichotomy. Promise of opportunity abroad, but often exploitation and marginalization once they arrive. And I remember as a child watching those films and thinking, that will be me someday. And like when I arrived here, I even believed in myself. And then I remember one of the many shows that I will actually watch was with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and I hold that show to my heart. It was about this minority family who were rich, but then there was this outsider, well, technically different culture, different everything, who was technically poor, but he was determined and he worked hard and he had some of his flair. But it made me want to become like study, want to go to the Ivy Leagues and everything to become them. It was great, and then reality set in. It was a television show. And yet, back to the track. Like, when my family finally came here, that romantic vision quickly turned into a cold reality of immigrant life. Language barriers, stereotypes, economic insecurity. The America we imagine rarely matched the America we encounter. Here's the brutal truth. The American economy depends heavily on immigrant labor. No matter what the Republicans say, they depend on immigrant labor. From agriculture and construction to healthcare and hospitality, immigrants form the backbone of essential industries. Yet, despite the crucial roles, immigrant workers often face exploitation, wage theft, unsafe conditions, and limited protection from labor laws. And according to the Economic Policy Institute, immigrants are significantly more likely to experience wage theft than their U.S.-born counterparts. Why? Fear of deportation, lack of legal status, or language barriers often keep workers from speaking out. Even if you're a legal resident, this fear of deportation is real. Like, employers exploit these vulnerabilities, creating a cycle of poverty and contradicts the promise of upward mobility. Now, this exploitation isn't new. In the early 20th century, Italian and Irish immigrants faced brutal labor conditions in factories. Now, Mexican laborers brought in under programs like the Bracero program of the 1940s and the 50s faced rampant abuse. This historical pattern underscores a dark reality. The system benefits economically from immigrant labor, yet politically and socially, immigrants remain disposable. And racism profoundly shaped immigrant experiences in America. While immigrant communities have historically been demonized as criminals, threats, or job stealers, racial bias also places a invincible ceiling on economic success. Many immigrants find themselves stuck in lower wage jobs or informal economies because of discrimination. Even those highly skilled or educated abroad face difficulties transferring credentials. Like meaning doctors, teachers, and engineers often end up working minimum wage jobs. Their talents wasted due to structural racism and bureaucracy. I have family who they immigrated here. They have master's degrees, but because of racism in the country, they are working as cleaners now. They are more qualified than someone here in the United States, but because of what they look like or where they come from, their education means nothing to anybody else, to someone here. Now, according to the Migration Policy Institute, approximately 2 million college-educated immigrants in America are unemployed or underemployed due to credential recognition issues. Imagine the loss, the talent, the knowledge wasted because the system won't recognize it. Which is funny because sometimes the universities in other countries are better than the universities here in the United States. So, whatever. And again, it goes back to my family, but I also knew a family friend from Colombia who has a highly respected pediatrician back home. In the United States, he drove taxis for a decade because the system refused to validate his credentials. And that's not the dream he was sold. That's humiliation dressed up as opportunity. He was trained to be a vet. Sorry, a pediatrician, a doctor. Why did I say vet? A doctor. And now he's driving taxis. And then U.S. immigration policies often exacerbate these issues, like policies built on exclusion and fear limit pathways to citizenship, increasing increasing problems. Programs like temporary protected status, TPS, and defer actions for childhood arrivals, DACA, though providing temporary relief, leave recipients uncertain about their long-term futures. This uncertainty inhibits long-term planning, home ownerships, or business investments, fundamentally blocking the upward mobility the dream promises. And from the restrictive quotas of the Immigration Act of 1924 to recent zero-tolerance policies and increased ICE rates, immigration law in America historically prioritizes exclusion or exploitation rather than integration or empowerment. And then here's the myth, the model minority myth. Yeah, despite systemic obstacles, immigrant success stories still persist. Americans, I love that idea that we're a country of immigrants and people came here and became something. But the reality is like they're often held up as a proof the dream is real. Asian American communities, for example, are frequently touted as the model minority, achieving economic success despite racism. This myth ignores diverse realities within these communities. It's harmful. It pits minorities against each other, downplays struggles, and discourages activism for systemic change. I see it all the time as well within my own Hispanic and Latino community. We will see our fellow Cubanos voting for the same people who want to deport you no matter what. They don't see you as an American, but they will still vote for them. And then this causes infighting between the Latinos. Anyways, and then the model minority myth emerges during the civil rights movement, deliberately employed to undermine African American demands for equality by creating a false narrative of meritocracy. You know, they say that you are hired because of your merit, not your whatever. It was a strategy of division, obscuring real systemic barriers, and racism faded by all the communities of color. Now, when I reflect back on the films of my childhood, those stories of immigrants achieving incredible success, I realize how damaging that narrative truly was. In mass reality, it diminished the struggles and reinforced a harmful idea. If you fail, it's your fault. The system remains unaccountable. And yes, here's the thing. Yes, success stories exist. People have succeeded, but those are the barely making it. Those are like the 0.1%. Like people like Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, or Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, are often highlighted as proof of the dream. But these stories are exceptions, not the rules. For every millionaire immigrant, millions more are trapped in cycles of poverty, debt, and marginalization. And Pew Research indicates immigrants' households earn roughly 80 cents for every dollar earned by native-born households. And for Latino immigrants, it's closer to 70 cents. Black immigrant households fare even worse, exposing racial disparities layered within immigrant inequality. And the American dream shouldn't be a lottery where one lucky few win. American strength has always been its immigrant communities, not merely in their labor, but in their dreams, ideas, resilience, and innovation. To honor that strength, America must confront systemic racism, reform immigration policies, and recognize immigrants' rights as human rights. And as someone who was sold that dream overseas, only to find a very different reality, I know change must come from honesty first. We must dismantle the myth and share realities openly, building a fair system that genuinely reward the hard work and sacrifice immigrants bring. And to immigrants everywhere, your dream is valid, your struggle matters, and America owes you better, because nobody should chase a dream across an ocean only to be told they have been better off staying home. And now, I invite you to share your stories. How did the American dream meet your reality as an immigrant or child of immigrants? Because your stories aren't just anecdotes. They are proof America must and can do better. So now let's stop pretending and let's pull back the curtain and get brutally honest. If we're talking about the American dream being the greatest myth ever sold, then we need to talk about who sold it, packaged it, wrapped it up in glitter, and shoved it down our throats until we swallowed it without question. Sounded nasty, but you know what I mean. I'm talking about the media. Of course we are, because we have Hollywood, TV studios, streaming giants, influencers, and social media companies. The corporations making billions selling illusions, myths, outright lies, day after day, year after year, convincing us that the dream exists, that is attainable, and that it's your fault alone if you can't achieve it. It's your fault. You're lazy. That's why. All that stuff. Again, I'm gonna go back to when I was a kid, and then when I was a kid in Colombia, I watched American TV shows religiously, like everybody did. Every night, those sitcoms, families, Full House, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Family Matters, Home Improvement, Kidden and Kel, and all that. They all had something in common: a picture-perfect life, big, beautiful houses, families that easily overcame problems with a heart-to-heart chat on a comfortable sofa, a quick moral lesson, roll credits, life was good again. These shows weren't just entertainment. They were selling a lifestyle, carefully crafted propaganda disguised as harmless fun. But they conveniently forgot to mention that most American families don't live in sprawling suburban homes. They're working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air did a good job about showing the realities of what happens between the suburban and the realities of America. And why do you think they always hid the reality? Because poverty isn't marketable. Struggle isn't glamorous, and admitting systemic inequality, well, that doesn't sell toothpaste, cars, or the new refrigerator, does it? The truth is, sitcom America never existed. Even today, series like Modern Family or Blackish over sanitized struggles, brief moments of reality sandwiched neatly between advertisements for expensive cars and luxurious vacations. Yes, I love Modern Family, sometimes, not all the time. And Blackish is pretty funny, but it's not the whole picture. And yet millions still believe in these illusions, wondering why their lives don't match the screen. Now let's go, but Hollywood isn't just part of the machine. Let's talk about social media, perhaps the most predatory tool yet invented for peddling this myth. every day on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We watch influencers telling us to hustle harder, rise and grind, sleep when you're dead. We've all seen these shallow quotes plastered over photos of luxury cars and mansions. And every post screams the same message. If you're not rich, you're not trying. Like, let's take Gary V, or Gary Vaynerchuk, the ultimate hustle guru. He's built an empire yelling at millennials and Gen Z, telling them they're lazy if they don't work 18 hours a day. But guess what? Gary V inherited a multi-million-dollar family wine business. He didn't start from zero. He started from privilege. Yet he profits millions by making struggling people believe their exhaustion isn't enough, that their burnout is a badge of honor. Now, influencers like Jake Paul, Logan Paul, Andrew Tate, all three pieces of trash, they promoted luxury lifestyles, mansions, supercars, private jets, funded by exploiting their audiences, monetizing misery and insecurity. In the other cases, with Andrew Tate, selling human smuggling and all that. Oh yeah, that's the other one too. And young people believe if they buy the courses, oh, that's the favorite part, or watch the videos or buy the merchandise, they'll somehow unlock this same magical success. And when they inevitably fail, they blame themselves, and never the illusion. And it's not just social media. Let's look at a show like Shark Tank. Hugely popular. I love it. It's I don't know. It's good entertainment sometimes. It was entertaining but it was also completely toxic. Each episode, desperate entrepreneurs beg millionaires like Mark Cuban and Kevin O'Leary and for scraps. It's reality TV at its most predatory. The message is simple: your success depends on impressing billionaires who will casually dismiss your dreams. Viewers internalize that capitalism isn't just ruthless. It's just normal now, acceptable. The sharks are heroes. The entrepreneurs begging for survival, mere entertainment. Or take Netflix documentaries glorifying the rise and grind culture, like Fire Festival, Inventing Anna, or series like Selling Sunset, glamorizing scams, exploitation, hustle at any cost. And they package desperation as entertainment, fraud as ingenuity, exploitation as brilliance. Hollywood romanticizes greed and acts shocked when the reality turns ugly. And let's go back to Hollywood, because Hollywood loves immigrant success stories too. Like films like The Pursuit of Happiness, starring Will Smith as Chris Gardner, a homeless man who becomes wealthy through sheer willpower. Even though it's the real true story of this man, he again is just the 0.01% of reality. It's inspirational, right? But how many films show the immigrant who works 3 jobs, pays taxes, struggles quietly for decades, and never makes it big? Those films don't get made because the American dream narrative doesn't allow space for realistic failure. Hollywood sells us the dream, but carefully cuts out the nightmare. This is why if you ever watch European television, it looks very depressing, because Europeans, in a lot of European television, they show the realities of life. That not everybody wins. That's just how reality is. But here in America, it's like if in American television, if they show poverty, it's sanitized, temporary, neatly resolved. They erase the structural racism, exploitation, and systemic oppression that makes poverty cyclical. And here's the reality Hollywood won't show you. 37 million Americans living in poverty right now. 500,000 homeless. Millions more living paycheck to paycheck. One illness away from bankruptcy. But turn on Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus. You won't see their stories unless they're packaged into neatly resolved plots where personal hard work alone solves everything. And again, back to social media companies thrive on insecurity, anxiety, dissatisfaction. They know that keeping us scrolling endlessly, chasing illusion of a better life is profitable. Algorithms feed users content promising wealth, beauty, success, creating anxiety and despair, then selling solutions to the problem they create. It's psychological warfare disguised as digital entertainment. And it's just so sad, guys. And when I was watching these American films in Colombia, I genuinely believe every bit of this narrative. I truly thought hard work alone guarantees success. I mentioned my dad was American. Sorry, my dad is American, and he told me the same stories. Work hard, you make it. And I moved here carrying this illusion proudly until it shattered. I realized I'd been tricked by a meticulously crafted Hollywood fantasy. Millions of immigrants shared this experience. Sold dreams, deliver nightmares. And we must ask, who benefits from this? Hollywood studios, social media companies, advertisers, influencers, corporations. They profit billions of dollars while we chase these impossible dreams, blame ourselves, and spiral into debt and depression. And it's time to stop believing their lies. Hollywood, all that stuff, Hollywood, influencers, social media platforms, none of these fuckers care about your dreams. They profit directly from your insecurities, exhaustion, debt, and despair. And we have to confront this predatory system head on. And we must demand honest narratives, genuine storytelling, and reject empty influencer culture built on deception and exploitation. How many times have we proven that these influencers rent these little places to make it look like they're big, but in reality they're not? Because your life isn't an algorithm, guys. Your worth isn't measured in hustle, and your dreams shouldn't fuel someone else's $billion payday. And all I'm gonna say, enough illusions, enough myths. It's time for a reckoning. It's time for every industry profiting for the American dream illusion to answer for the nightmares they created. So now that we pull back the curtain, now that we expose the rot behind the glossy image, let's sit with it. Let's talk about what it all means. Because we've spent this entire episode breaking down the myth of the American dream. How it was sold, or how it's been weaponized, how it's been twisted into a con. And if you're still holding on to it, I get it. I really do. Because I was raised on it too. I was told, if you work hard, if you keep your head down, follow the rules, believe in this country, good things will come. But you know what happens when you keep your head down for too long? You stop seeing who's stepping on your back. And let's be real, that's exactly what this system was built for. The American dream was never meant for all of us. It was carved out, manicured and locked behind gates. First, for the white landowners, then the white homeowners, then the corporations, and everybody else, you get crumbs if you're lucky. You get jobs with no benefits. You get 2 or 3 side hustles just to survive. And you get denied loans, priced out of homes, burned in debt, and told it's your fault for not wanting it bad enough. And yet we're told to be grateful. We're told this is still the land of opportunity. But the opportunity for who? For the CEO making $8,000 an hour while the janitor on night shift can't even afford the company's insurance plan? For the politicians who own stock in student loan services while voting against forgiveness? For the Republican governor who poses in front of a "We support workers" sign while signing bills that gut labor protections? Let me be clear. The American dream hasn't just been lost. It was stolen, repackaged, resold, and rigged against the very people who keep this country running. And while we're here, let's stop pretending the GOP gives a damn about immigrant lives. They use us as props, as pawns, as punching bags, as cheap labor all at once. They run attack ads calling us invaders, drug mules, criminals. Then turn around and say, we need hardworking immigrants to do the jobs Americans won't. The nerve, the hypocrisy. Anyways, we pick the crops, clean the houses, build the homes, serve the food, take care of the elderly, and raise their kids, and they still call us a threat? If you're undocumented, oh, forget it. You're good enough to scrub toilets in a 5-star hotel, but not good enough for a driver's license. You're good enough to work a double shift during a pandemic, but not good enough for hazard pay or healthcare. And they say we're lazy, we're entitled, we should be thankful. Thankful for what? The trauma, the exploitation, the broken promises? Let's be honest, Republicans love immigrant labor. They just hate immigrant people. And the cruelest part, they parade us on campaign stages when it's convenient. The model minority, the legal immigrant, the good ones. And the next day, they're signing bills to deport us. You don't believe me? Look at what's going on at all these ICE agencies. They don't want us to be free. They want you to be useful, quiet, profitable, disposable. So no, we don't need a better dream. We need a better reality. Because dreaming without change is just delusion. And hope without action is just sedation. And what does a better reality look like? Here's what it is. And this is going to be controversial, apparently. A better reality looks like this. Universal healthcare, where your access to insulin isn't tied to your employer or your fucking zip code. Tuition-free college and trade school, so you don't have to choose between education and lifelong debt. A living wage, because working full-time should not mean living in poverty. Tenant protections, so you don't get evicted because your landlord jacked the rent for market adjustments. Paid family leave, because raising a child should never cost you your job or your dignity. And pathways to citizenship, real ones, not decades of paperwork and hoops and threats. That's not a handout, that's justice. And we've been brainwashed to measure success by one thing: how much you have. By owning a house doesn't mean you're free if you're drowning in debt. And climbing the corporate ladder doesn't mean anything if the ladder is leaning on a burning building. We need to stop defining success by how much we escape and start defining by how much we build together. The richest country on earth should not have people rationing insulin. The richest country on earth should not have teachers working second jobs to afford groceries. The richest country on earth should not throw away people because they were born on the wrong side of a border. So here's what I'm asking you. Stop chasing the dream they sold us and start demanding the future we deserve. That means show up to city council meetings, run for a local office, support candidates who actually stand for the people, not just the donors. No matter what, Republican or Democrat. I know you guys are thinking that I'm just going to vote all Democrat. I pay attention to this. And you know what? All the establishment Democrats need to be thrown away. It's the same thing as Republicans. Call your representatives and demand real policy, not slogans. I want to see action, not just a promise. Organize your workplace. Join a union. Push your school board to fund education over security contracts. Because if we don't build up something better, they'll keep feeding us scraps and calling it a feast. Because this country doesn't need more millionaires or bootstraps or TikTok success stories. It needs dignity. It needs fairness. It needs truth. And we get there not by dreaming, but by doing. So let's stop waiting for permission. Let's stop apologizing for wanting more. Let's stop pretending it's just because we made it through the system. The system is working, but it's not. And we don't need to wake up from the American dream. We need to burn the blueprint and build something real. Something just, something free, something better. Because I don't want my kids to dream of escaping this country. I want them to live in one they don't have to escape from. And I'm going to say thank you so much for sticking with me. This episode wasn't about despair. It's about clarity. It's about choosing to fight smarter, louder, and for all of us. And the next time someone tells you to be grateful for the American dream, you got to tell them, we're not dreaming anymore. We are building. And hey, if you made it all the way through this one, thank you. Thank you for your time, your energy, your attention. I don't take that lightly. I know how easy it is to tune out, to scroll past, to pretend this shit doesn't affect us. But you didn't. You stayed, you listened. And that tells me you care. that you're paying attention, that maybe, just maybe, you're ready to do something about it. Because this podcast isn't just therapy for me, it's a call to arms. And I hope it lit something in you too, because we got a lot of work to do. And we're just getting started. And you've been listening to The Lies We Tell, where the truth isn't comfortable, but is necessary. If this made you uncomfortable, challenge you, or piss you off in all the right ways, share it. And if you're ready to fight for a better world, don't wait for permission. Be loud, be real, be dangerous, the legal way. See you next time.